What is Western education? What is education for? What is paideia? What are the humanities? How has modern education changed from classical education? These questions are answered, at least in part, in this little book here, The Heart of Culture, A Brief History of Western Education by Habiger Institute for Catholic Leadership. And actually on the cover of the book, you have a painting. This is not the full painting, but it's by Botticelli during the Renaissance period. And these women in the painting represent the liberal arts. So of the trivium and the quadrivium. So you have grammar, you have logic and rhetoric. Then you have the math. So those are the language arts. Then you have the mathematical arts of arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and music. And exalted here at the center, right, sitting higher than all of them, is Lady Wisdom. She represents wisdom, obviously implying that if you receive this education, this classical liberal arts education, what you'll get is wisdom, right? So that I found that to be a perfect painting to use for this book. That's really what this book focuses on. So that's what Western education is centered on: is wisdom, virtue, the language arts, and the mathematical arts. And so, if you want a quick insight into the history of Western education, this will be a good book to start. And so, in this video, I want to briefly explore a few of my favorite quotes from this book. So, let's go ahead and do that. It says, "The study of education always touches on the key elements of a given culture or society. In its broadest sense, education is a process by which a grouping of people passes on its cultural patrimony to the next generation. Whatever their level of material or cultural development, all peoples need to educate their young in ways of acting and envisioning the world if their society is to have any communal continuity through time. This means that the study of education is one of the best ways to get to know a culture. What a society determines to pass on to its young members is a concentrated amalgam of everything they think most important for their identity and their continued flourishing." Okay, there's much that can be said in this rather lengthy quote here, but the thing I want to especially emphasize is the idea of education uh, being related to culture, right? A cultural identity. And this is really where we get the idea of paideia. Paideia is the Greek word that can roughly be translated as education. There's not really an English equivalent to the Greek paideia, because paideia is broader, it's more holistic in nature. The way I like to summarize the meaning of paideia is enculturation. That's essentially what paideia is: enculturation. You're bringing up the young into the culture, into the mores of the culture, the beliefs and practices of the culture, as this paragraph is essentially making clear. And the idea there is that through this paideia, these young children will grow up to be virtuous and wise men and women who can contribute to society. And actually, interestingly, this goes into the book here. This is briefly discussed in the book that when the Romans sought to carry on this idea of paideia, they used the Latin word humanitas, which of course is humanity or human nature, and anything that defines humanity, such as civilization. Um, So we kind of get a good sense there of paideia by looking at the Latin idea of humanitas. And it is, of course, where we get the humanities, and the idea of studia humanitatis, the humanistic studies, which I believe is a term coined by Cicero. So paideia, humanities, is a holistic education, not specialization, but holistic, comprehensive, that centers on wisdom, virtue, of bringing people up into the culture. So really, it's very anti-individualistic, and I emphasize that because we live in a very individualistic society, a very individualistic age. And I think something that needs to be recovered is this recognition of our heritage, of our identity, of tradition going back millennia. Of course, we're talking about Western education here. The West, in short, is defined by uh, Judeo-Christian and Greco-Roman ideals, right? So that paragraph, I wanted to start with that paragraph, not only because the book starts there, but it's a good summary into what the book is about, what education is about, what Western education is about, what paideia is, what humanitas is, and so on. In consciously re-embracing the Greek ideal of paideia, the humanists of the Renaissance era, keep in mind that uh, humanism or humanist today does not mean exactly what it meant during the Renaissance period. Today, humanism, like contemporary humanism, and a contemporary humanist is largely secular and atheistic. That's not what humanism meant during the Renaissance period. It was, in short, about recovering what it means to be human, recovering the arts, the subjects that characterize an education that brings one up into being fully human, to being a fully formed human being. So again, it says, so the humanists sought to form the whole person by addressing all aspects of human development. The desired goal was eloquentia, a complex quality that included knowledge and love of literature, gracefulness of speech and comportment, and practical knowledge for addressing the concerns of societal governance. So think of virtuous governance and citizenry. The popular notion of the Renaissance man, the person of balance who was good at many different things, originated in the humanist renewal of paideia. And so I think the thing that really stands out in this quote, the thing that I really like, is of course that idea of the Renaissance man. It's actually somewhat funny. When I was a teenager, I said I want to be a Renaissance man when I grow up. I don't think back then I really understood what that meant. Um, but even growing up, looking back at my life, I've always had varied interests. I've never just been interested in one thing. I've had varied interests. And that's ultimately, I think, what led me into studying the humanities. So we can think of this kind of education here as a general education. Now, that doesn't mean you don't work towards mastery. In fact, mastery is very key in a classical liberal arts education. You work towards mastery, but you don't work towards mastery in one thing. You work towards mastery in many things, in the things that characterize humanity. Okay, and for the third and final quote, it reads, "A true education is rooted in a holistic, indeed cosmic view of truth as a totality. This is especially important in an age of increasing specialization in mounting skepticism toward any holistic view of reality. Okay, so in this quote, what we're seeing, first of all, notice true education, right? It's making a distinction here. You have education, you have various perspectives of education, but there is a true education to be had. And that that may come across to many people today as arrogant. How can you say that there is a true education? But nonetheless, if we keep in mind what we've been looking at, we've been thinking about and discussing, uh, of the relationship of education to what it is to be human, then I think we can more easily see and agree with the idea of there being a true education, meaning a true education is one that pertains to our humanity, that treats us as human beings, that recognizes us as human beings, and seeks to bring us up into to where we are formed into truly being human. Um, and then you even hear the idea of a totality of truth. So again, this is very much cutting against the grain of specialization, which is the uh, more of a modern notion, a modern concept in the area of education, that of specialization. Right? You specialize in one thing, you go to school for one thing, you go to school in order to get a job in a particular field or industry or place or skill. Um, that's the idea of specialization. Whereas the humanistic education, the liberal arts education, is more general in nature. Um, it seeks to establish a person in the various arts and the various sciences to be well rounded and knowledgeable in many areas, able to speak to many areas, able to engage in many areas. And this, of course, is actually where we get the idea of university to begin with, which university literally means wholeness or complete or totality. And I think you even have the idea there of one and many. So in the original university, uh, the scholars, the students, they engage in a multiplicity of learning, with the idea that it's all related. It's all related. There is an ultimate truth to which all of this is oriented after. Whereas today in our universities, everything is so disparate, right? We have departments for everything, and all these departments have different buildings, and the faculty in those departments often don't communicate with each other. They may even look down on each other because well, they're not part of my discipline, my field. It's very different from what education used to be and what university used to be. So I offer up this book here as a recommendation. I encourage all of you watching to go out and buy the book and read it. It's only about 120 pages. It will not take long to get through. And I will provide a link to the book in the description below. Thank you for watching.